That was one of the most awkward hugs I've ever done.
It's because he's so much bigger than I am.
It was weird.
This is like Letterman. And these guys,
I know.
what an awesome band.
We asked the, we asked the band leader there to be more like Letterman if he would shave his head. He said no. But that would have been
so cute as he is.
that would have been awesome. Well, Mike, welcome, and I wasn't
really. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I wasn't just kissing up to you. You've been a part of our media life for how many years now?
Well, I've been doing this for about 40 years, and I've had the great good fortune to be here in the Valley for almost 20 years. Wow. And in my industry, that's an eternity. You see the young people coming and going, but my wife and I really like it here, and we've been very happy and raised our family and have in-laws in Mesa, so we feel like this is really our home now. And I've had the privilege of covering a lot of events in your great community and all over the state, and had a great career. Been very lucky.
That's awesome. So you've been in the business 40 years, so you started when you were 3.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, no, well, I'm just about 60, so it's been a long road, but I really have had the great good fortune to be on the front line of a lot of historic events, and today, of course, meaningful for all of us, and we were dispatched to New York immediately after the attacks, and probably one of the most profound experiences in my life.
Well, rather than me just yapping and cluttering it up, why don't you just do a little, what does this date mean to you? What does it take you back 14 years ago?
Well, you know, people frequently ask me, because I'm sort of the ambulance chaser. I cover lots of bad news, and people frequently come up, and isn't it depressing? One man actually called me and said, do you think you have post-traumatic stress syndrome because of all the things that I've covered over the years? And I don't feel that way at all, because granted, I cover a lot of bad events, catastrophes, you know, crises, but those are just the contexts of the stories. What I end up covering is the human response to those terrible events. And that is almost universally uplifting and heartening, and it certainly was in New York. Terrible event, but that wasn't the story. How did we respond to that story? And it still moves me. I mean, talking to the firefighters and the police officers who responded that day, and just the community, the love. And we as a nation, I think it was demonstrated that we really can overcome all of our differences and join together. And I saw that on the streets of New York in those days after 9/11, and it still moves me.
Oh yeah, I don't think there's anyone here over the, you know, if you were, well, everybody in this room was old enough to know exactly where you were, what you were doing, and it's still, I kind of sometimes I wish we would show the images more. I know we've shown them, they're hard to see here, but they're on there. Just kind of as a reminder, you know.
Well, you know, it was a moment that changed our nation and changed the course of history for better or worse. And it's, I think that we should all reflect and take, certainly on this day, you know, sort of think about what it means to us, what it means to our country, what it means to the world.
Well, our first question, and by the way, Mike's open to any questions you might have. And the first one is, what's your most favorite story?
You know, they're little ones. A man and his son who built a covered wagon, and a cameraman and I were driving around the street many, 30 years ago, and saw this man and his son, and it sort of showed me what being a father was about. And they were living sort of off the land. They're little stories. I mean, I've covered serial killers and superstars. But they're the real people in those, those sort of unique moments who really tell you something about life. And that's one that always goes back. I went over and covered Princess Diana's death, and I found this frame maker, this Italian guy, who made these ornate golden frames for great portraits, some of the greatest artwork in the world. And he had never spoken about Princess Diana's death, and he had sat with her while she was having her portrait painted, and he allowed me and my cameraman into his studio as he is carving these beautiful portraits that hang in the Louvre and everywhere else around some of the most famous artwork. And he just talked about her as a human being, and what they chatted with while she was having her portrait painted, and how her love for her children. And it's those little moments, those insights into either the ordinary people or famous people that give you some insight into their humanity. And I love that story. You know, those are the stories that I hold nearest and dearest to my heart.
That's awesome. Well, here's a great question. Since you called yourself an ambulance chaser, have you ever been thrown off a property?
Oh, 1,000 times. I have been punched. I have been shot at. I have, you know, and I saw
awesome. So today won't be anything new for you.
Yes, but bring it on. But you know, and you see those. You saw that terrible story where the crew was ambushed while doing a live shot. We've had, you know, there are dangers in my business, and we've certainly we were in the streets of L.A. during the riots, and we were shot at. And I actually, the reason I got my job in Phoenix, I was working in LA for a TV show. I did an ambush interview. Guy threw a punch at me on television. Literally the day after it ran on nationwide television, I got a phone call from a news director in Phoenix. Hey, I saw you get punched on TV last night. That was great. Come work for us. I call it the fist of fate. The reason I am in Phoenix is because I got punched on national television, changed my life, and my wife and I have been very happy, but literally it was because some guy threw a punch at me.
That's awesome.
The reason I'm here.
If you're watching at home and you're between jobs right now, just have somebody punch you.
It's a great career. In my case, it was a big career builder, so.
That's awesome. Well, I know another huge story when I read your intro. Of course, 9/11 because of today, but Katrina had to be life-changing.
Yeah, a cameraman and I went down to help out some other TV stations because we knew they got just blown out. And they were all in New Orleans, and we realized that that's where all the coverage was. So we basically stole a car, drove to Biloxi, Mississippi, while New Orleans was getting flooded and getting all the attention. Other parts of the Gulf got flattened. And we lived in a car for a week, sleeping there and parking behind a truck stop because you were in jeopardy of being looted and robbed. People were desperate, and that was a moment when things didn't work well as a nation. We didn't respond well, and there was a level of desperation in the streets of Biloxi, Mississippi. But literally, New Orleans got flooded, Biloxi got flattened. And we were there as they were pulling bodies out of the rubble, and it was a terrible week. But you know, again, but even at the federal government wasn't responding well. The local people helping one another, charities bringing in. You know, I listened to the woman before me about her with her charity. It was small charities that were bringing water in to people that hadn't had anything to drink for 3 days, nothing to eat. You know, we're a great country, and again, even in those moments when it wasn't working great, on a grassroots level, people did the right thing.
That's amazing. And was Katrina 10 years ago?
We just had an anniversary,
Was it 10?
and I think, yeah, it all starts running together.
Yeah,
but
10 years ago. You know, think about your business. The media has changed so much in the last 10 years. You know, you used to have to wait for the news. You know, I wonder what's going on. I'll wait till 5 o'clock and watch. Yeah, now,
that's right.
boom.
Yeah. You know, and the younger generation this is the sort of perplexing thing for my business. Newspapers are dead. We are, your traditional television broadcasts are one step behind that because the younger generation has already cast their ballot. They're not going to wait till 5 o'clock to get their news because they're getting it right now. And so you're right, the business model for my industry has changed more in the last 10 years than it had in the previous 40. Because the internet and smartphones and everything and the immediate connection globally has changed everything. And now nobody's really figured out the business model. People still want the content, but having to get paid. I mean, my stuff goes on the internet. Suddenly it's all over the world. So you know there's an appetite for information. How everybody gets paid along the food chain is still being worked out, but you're no doubt about it. We live in a rapidly changing world.
Well, the crazy thing is, everything that happens now is going to be around forever. I could probably go on YouTube and find you getting punched, couldn't I? On that?
You probably could, and you could find me with various hairstyles that would embarrass me over the course of, you know. But yeah, unfortunately, when you live your life in front of the camera and with all of the internet now, all of those bad days are there to haunt you the rest of your life. Oh my goodness! And here are some of them, right, even as we speak.
You look like a catalog model there, Mike.
Well, let me tell you, that's the magic of lighting and makeup, because, and good photographers.
I think the best look for a guy is the goatee and the.
Well, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
I put a lot of shoe polish in mine, because mine would be as white as his.
You know, it's sad. This is actually a toupee. That's how bad this is. Mike's up for any questions. So, what do you think? So feel free to send them. What do you think I know you go everywhere. You go where the news is, but being based in Arizona, when you go outside of Arizona, what's the perception that we have? I think we're all business people here.
You know, I think primarily people, you know what, I don't know what other people think. I love this state. And I love the people, and we know what it's about. And do we have challenges and problems? Sure. But, you know, I think every place does. And so when people start pointing the finger at this place is where, you know, we know what we've got going here. And I think most people who pay attention know that there are a lot of wonderful people and things and attractions, and just, you know, the lifestyle here is, all I can say is it got our vote for the last 20 years. My wife and I have been very happy here.
Yeah, same. I think all of us can attest to that, or we wouldn't be here. Speaking of interesting places in the state, I know you just got back from the Jerome Film Festival. What's going on up there? I didn't even know they had a film festival.
Well, it's a little festival, but they were very gracious to allow me to run a documentary that I did 10 years ago, speaking of anniversaries. I spent much of my career, my wife and I are both from Utah, and we both come from polygamous backgrounds, as a lot of people. And I have spent much of my career focusing on some of the abuses of women and children in the polygamous communities along the Utah-Arizona border. We were really, I think, one of the, probably the first people to commit to covering that in a serious way over the course of time. And we put together a documentary called Colorado City and the Underground Railroad 10 years ago. And the folks up at Jerome, and I think that changed, the stories in that documentary really changed the course of history in this state and the way we deal and look at some of the problems in that community. And I was proud of the documentary, and they allowed me to show it, and I'm really grateful for that.
Oh, that's awesome. So if we want to see it, can we see it online? Or
you can, yeah. I've got it on a YouTube page, and it really, and the thing that a lot of people taking credit for the incarceration of this man, Warren Jeffs, but really the truth of the matter is the women that we focus in, and this really was the thing that's moving about this story and this saga is, it was a handful of brave women who got out of that community and came out and really started raising hell. And we told their stories, and they are the instruments of change, and really started an American revolution that America didn't pay attention to. But their impact has been great in behalf of the women and children that are abused in those communities. And the credit goes to these women. And it really was, they came out of it and said, we want to make change. And they are my heroes.
That's great. That's awesome. Here's another question from Kevin. Getting punched, thrown out, and shot at, how do you keep your motivation to go back out there and get those stories?
Because I'm stupid, and I'm a slow learner. Ask my wife. You know what? I'm sort of nearly 60, but I really feel like sort of still a hyperactive kid. I just got old, so I'm sort of an adrenaline junkie, and I love the adventure, and I love being really on the front row of history, and I've had the great good fortune to do that.
Well, since you said you were stupid, which I know you're not.
I think I know where this is going.
I would like to remind you, if you've ever seen the classic, it's always up there with as one of the greatest video movies ever, or cinematic masterpieces ever. Mike was in the movie Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, no matter what I do for the rest of my career, I will forever be best remembered for 30 seconds in the movie Dumb and Dumber. And all I can say is 25 years later, I'm still getting 37-cent residual checks. So, you know, whatever.
You save those up, that adds up to the 300 grand you're gonna need from getting shot at.
I'm gonna get our insurance agent after this.
Okay, what's your memorable line from Dumb and Dumber?
Next up on A Current Affair, the heartbreaking story of the little blind Rhode Island boy who was duped into buying a dead parakeet. All I can say is that line has made me a lot of money over the years.
Awesome. Did the hair stand up on the back? That was like Citizen Kane right there. That was
well,
awesome.
when you're in the company of Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels, you better bring your A game.
That's funny. Well, good for you. Here's another question. Yeah. Wow, talk about topical. What's going on with the freeway shootings?
We have a serial predator who is preying on our community, and it's the nature of the beast. They scare us, and rightfully so. Talking about this last night, I've covered all kinds of serial killers, did the one and only interview with the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, covered dozens of serial killers all over. Obviously, we haven't gotten to that point where someone has died, even serious injuries, and we're very lucky, but they scare a community, and in a situation like this, what really makes it scary is most serial killers or serial predators seem to target a specific demographic. They're people that they go after, and their victim group falls into a fairly identifiable segment of our community. With somebody like this, we're all in that demographic. Anybody who gets in their car and drives on the I-10 is a potential victim. I know that the law officers, our friends over at DPS, and their law enforcement partners are out working hard to solve this. I have confidence that they're good people and know what they're doing. But it's one of those kind of moments that we all need to be a little concerned and remind us that there are bad things and bad people out there.
Yep, that's true. Well, I know that you mentioned before the episode, you told me you talked to Frank Milstead, who's a frequent guest here.
Well-known guy here in Mesa.
Yeah, and he's of the opinion that maybe it's not a...
I had a chance to chat with Frank, and I've known him for 20 years, and asking me, does he think it's one person? At this point, he says he does not. He thinks that there are three identifiable MOs, modus operandi. So, copycats, perhaps, when you get this, you wonder if the media is good by warning people or the media is bad by inciting this kind of stuff, and I don't know the answer to that. I think the community needs to be informed, but could there be copycats with all this media and somebody wanting to get their 15 seconds of infamy? Who knows? But, it's one of those moments when we need to be cautious, and as a community, we need to rally together, and if you see something, say something.
That's right. Well, one of the great things about, there's so many benefits to living in a big city, and let's face it, Phoenix is a huge city. Oh, my goodness. And this is just one of the things that we've got to help, like you say, got to help one another out, because there's some crazy people out there.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. And we will. I have confidence in we have local, state, and federal officers working. I've been on the I-10 for the last 3 days covering this story, and the presence is great, and, we got to trust that they're going to be able to find somebody, and we can breathe a little easier.
A lot of times I think people tend to blame the media for things that...
And well, they should, in a lot of cases.
Well, yeah, short of punching you.
Yeah, well, I probably deserve this, so...
That's awesome. But what do you think? What would you like to see from your fellow media people? How have we changed?
That's a profound question, and in a lot of ways I wake up and I'm glad I'm sort of at the end of my career, because it's changing so rapidly. There is no filter. I mean, the internet is a wonderful tool, but there is no filter. And I've seen the media now fragmented into tribes, and we all listen to the people who sort of confirm our innate beliefs. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't. I think we don't talk much anymore on a political level. I think on a media level, we tune into the people who sort of sustain our innate beliefs. And so are we. I don't know what the answer is to it. Was it better when we had Walter Cronkite telling us that's the way it is? We certainly have more choices. We probably have more information, but again, greater minds than mine need to figure out whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And the way we can use the media and we can all be informed and sort of, you know, weed out the good stuff and what's true and what's not true.
I should have researched this, but what's the old Mark Twain quote? If you don't read the paper, you're uninformed, and if you do read the paper, you're misinformed?
Leave it to Mr. Twain to put it in.
Something like that. Yeah. It's unfortunately, you're right. You kind of listen to what you want to hear and tune out the message that the other people have.
Well, yeah, and you know, again, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we're better when we communicate and we recognize that we are all sort of a community.
That's great. Okay, 40 years in. What's the future hold for you? You mentioned you're kind of at the tail end. You're not going to quit anytime soon.
Yeah, well, no, I'm going to try to do a couple more years unless they fire me, which is, and my business is a day in and day out kind of thing. But no, I've had a great run at Channel 3, and I'm very grateful. They've been great to me, and I'm going to do it for a couple more years. And then I have a son who wants to go to Hollywood and be a movie star, so I may go see if I could do a little character acting on the side. And you know, I've made a lot of movies over the years and had the great good fortune to sort of, again, keep my hand in that. So I may try to do a little of that. And I'm writing a book. So like everybody else, when you get to be my age, you just think, maybe somebody will care what I got to say. So I'm going to scribble it down. And I've been working on that for a while. So.
Well, that's awesome. I'm older than you, and I'm trying to read a book.
But you look so much better.
No. You're. Let me ask you. So how did they make Dumb and Dumber 2 without you?
Well, I sort of think the Farley brothers didn't want me to upstage Carrie and Daniels again.
Yeah.
So they didn't invite me. You know,
you weren't the budget.
Yeah, that's right. They couldn't afford my 37-cent check. But you know, and I honestly, and I saw the second one, and I got to confess, the first one was way better.
Oh yeah.
Way better.
If you were going to only be in one.
If you're going to be in one, so, no, but yeah, it was a great. It was really fun to do, and I got to see Jeff Daniels in the dog suit and saw the dog car. So and before anybody was famous, I used to share an office when I worked for an old TV show called A Current Affair, and we shared an office with In Living Color. And Jim Carrey, before he was famous, and I used to get coffee at a lunch truck together. So, you know, Jamie Foxx and all. It's interesting to have been part of this industry for a long time and see, you know, people that you cross paths and they become superstars. It's wonderful. Yeah, it really is wonderful.
Know. Well, this is a great question. When perception is everything, how would you like people to perceive you when you're out of the field and not doing stories anymore? When we think of Mike Watkiss, what would you like for people to think about you?
You know, I would hope that they just recognize that I've been in this industry long enough to know that you don't buy into this press releases. You try to keep your feet on the ground. And I'm just an old storyteller. And to the extent I've had success is I've been lucky to cover good stories about really interesting people. And you don't start, you know, being on television, you can get sort of a sense that, you know, whatever. But I'm grateful that people will allow me into their living room every night, and that's a privilege. And it's easy to break that sort of trust by being a jerk. And I think just, you know, I don't want to come off like that, and I hope that I recommend to people in our industry, just because you're on television doesn't really mean you're, or, you know, whatever. Keep your feet on the ground.
That's awesome. Well, you've managed to do something that's, I know Channel 3 over the years has been through a lot of ownership changes, and there's been all kinds of changes in leadership, and you've been a constant. So there's something going on there. You've got pictures of somebody doing something.
And under the advice of my lawyer, I'm not going to respond to that question.
So there you go. Any other questions for Mr. Mike Watkiss? Otherwise, yes, there we go.
Well, and that's certainly become a rallying cry in the wake of the Aurora shooting, which I went up to cover as well. And I know a lot of people in the media are saying, let's not do the names of the killers. And, you know, I've sat down face to face with killers many times, and most of the time they are really sort of cowardly punks. And to glorify them in a way that makes them some sort of rock stars is wrong, and that's not who they are. And you know, the media is one of those entities that is going to do what it wants to do, and there is not a lot, especially with so much media. You know, you're going to find this on the internet if you want it. But I would hope that most people sort of do recognize that this is very painful for the people left behind, and repeating their names and their stories is difficult. Is it going to stop? No. Sad truth, it's not.
Well, let's just hope that there's a quick resolution to this. They find it.
Yeah.
Maybe they've found it since we've been here this morning. That would be awesome.
Well, that will be my story today. So let's keep our fingers crossed, because I'd love to wrap this up. And I know that there are a lot of law officers and motorists in this valley who feel the same way.
That'd be great. Hey, when you're cruising around doing your stories, what are you riding around in it?
Beat up old live trucks with bad air conditioning and too many miles on the odometers. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, let that stay dirty. But for your own personal car or your wife's, you know, here we go. This is a good way to get brownie points. As our special,
and I always need them.
Yeah, well, we all do. As our special guest today, our great sponsor, Cobblestone Auto Spa, all over the valley, would like to give you a $100 detailed gift card. So take your car, take Mrs. Watkiss'
If you've
car.
seen my ride, you know how desperately it needs this. So.
Take it in.
Thank you very much.
Let them detail that. And how about a big round of applause, Mr. Mike Watkiss?
It's really been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Brother.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, you can leave. You can stay or leave. Thanks, Mike. All right, thank you once again, Mr. Mike Watkiss. Appreciate your time.